a glass high-rise building or a high-rise building in the desert out of concrete, glass, and steel, you create a problem. The percentage of buildings designed by architects and engineers is negligible. Some people say 2%, some people say 1%, some people say 5 to 10%, where we air condition only to 29 degrees and then use ceiling fans with air movement to provide comfort. But my sleeping room is not heated. And sometimes in winter it goes down to 10, 12 degrees. We need to be more humble. I think that's the message.
First, a little introduction. So, although user comfort itself is not a new concept, but with the environmental impacts and the changes, this process that we have traditionally done needs to be really rethought. And in this concept, I think we need to ask the question: how can we deliver climate conditions in another way, in a way that is more in coherence with the existing climate crisis, with the resources and everything? And in this response, we want to reapproach passive design strategies, and also looking at the impact that it can have both on environment, on communities, as a way to how to provide friendly user climate to communities where it's not that well available. And today with us, we have Professor Thomas Auer, who is the head of the Chair of Building Technology and Climate Responsive Design at TUM. His research primarily explores energy efficiency and its impact on the built environment, examining both the building scale, such as form, materials, technologies, and this district or urban scale, including urban forms and infrastructure. He employs simulation tools to analyze and optimize the complex interactions between buildings and their technical systems. So Professor Thomas Auer studied process engineering at University of Stuttgart and focused on energy efficiency and user comfort in building. During his work at Transolar, he is managing director of the company, which has branches in Stuttgart, Munich, and New York. And for many years, he has also been teaching at several universities, including Yale University from 2001 to 2008, and has been a professor at TUM since 2014. And so I had the honor to meet the professor and lecture series, Climate Responsive Buildings. And oftentimes he would say that you have two types of lectures. So ones are about how, and the other ones are about why. And I would say that this is sort of a bit more into the first category, the second category of why. And I would also say that another thing you also often mention is about stupid questions, that there really exist though. And I will try to ask not too many of them today. Okay. So first my question is about in the lecture series, it was quite inspiring seeing how different fields and how different students of different fields come together, both from engineering side and from architectural side. And I think it's quite interesting seeing as oftentimes the architect's job in giving the climate is more about facilitating these very huge systems that an engineer afterwards calculate and construct. But I think that here we can see that often this lack of cohesion, I would say, is a reason why we are experiencing some of the issues we are currently. And I would say that both academically and in your professional work as in Transolar, you have shown just how connected these two fields need to be. And so I would love to hear a bit more about how in practice the relationship between architect and climate engineering and other stakeholders work usually, and how deep really has this impact of climate adaptivity to the overall design as in terms of both form and other things, not just technical systems.
Okay, first of all, I need to correct you. First of all, I have to say thank you for reaching out. Really happy to provide or support you with this podcast. And I need to correct you with my CV. I'm not a managing director at TransSolar anymore. I'm still with TransSolar, but we are in this lucky situation that a couple of young people now took over the managing role, which is amazing, which is great. I have now, after being a boss of many people, now the same people began to be my boss, which is something I really enjoy. So now coming back to your question, how is this? I mean, we are in this lucky position that architects reach out to us let's say, when they are interested in having this exchange. And climate engineering, it's like about solving a problem which we have created in the first place. Like if you do a glass high-rise building or a high-rise building in the desert out of concrete, glass and steel, you create a problem. And then you need smart engineering to solve it. What's more interesting is like when we work with a design team, with architects who come to us and we have an open conversation about what is the right approach for a certain context, for a certain climate, for a certain client, and so on, for a certain type of use. What's a good approach? And not that we want to become architects. I mean, we always have been engineers, and we consider ourselves being engineers, but it's about, let's say, discussing on the same eye level. It's about informing design. I think that's what we try to do. We try to use climate engineering. We try to use modeling. We try to use numbers. Like we will sometimes call it evidence-based design, coming out of this realm of I believe, etc. We need more evidence in the design and use this to guide design. And architects approach us a lot of times, or mainly. Again, we have also those who come to us say, like, there's this problem, can you solve it to me? This is more like enabling, which is not as interesting. But a lot of architects approach us because they want to have this exchange. They want to have this discussion. And then climate engineering, I think we are the only ones who call it climate engineering, but this, however we want to call this discipline, has the possibility to really bridge between engineering, like MEP engineering, really, let's say, sizing the piping, sizing the systems, sizing the shafts, and design and the client. So that's our role, where we prefer the most.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting to really think about that. Fundamentally, the role of construction and the building itself is to really deliver this environment that is for the people. But nowadays, seeing how cities are built, how far we are actually going from as architects, as designers, from this initial and primordial mission of the architect, of the planner, to deliver these conditions for a livable place. It's quite scary to imagine the drift, how far we are actually from this mission, I would say. And as in response to that, how do you think in the future, is this something that is is this gap even widening between architects and their ability to react to specific climates, or is there more of an deeper understanding approaching?
I mean, the question is, how far do we want to go back? But when we look at modernism, the early days of modernism, like in the 20s of the last century, modernism was really, let's say, the first steps were really very sensitive. So if you look at the sanatorium, and I forgot the name in Davos, which is like one of the landmark early modernism buildings, or the open air school from Duikers in Amsterdam. It was always about healthy environments. It was always about how do we expose people. It was a time when hygienics in buildings were problematic. And it was very clear that particularly our children need to be exposed more to sun, to light, and to air. So that's why the German slogan in modernism was Licht, Luft, Sonne, light, sun, and air. This was the driver for early modernism. It's like industrializing housing, affordable housing, the same, let's say, goals we still talk about today. And we see good examples, and they had winter gardens, they had buffer zones, etc., etc. They were really thinking about adaptive climate approach. This is all gone. I mean, what remains from modernism is, and now I simplify, of course, I mean, we can't see it you see a lot of gray in between black and white, but the majority of the buildings we see, only the glass, concrete remained from this idea of modernism. And this is very important and relevant that we talk about this, because just to give you a number, the International Energy Agency has a study that shows that the amount of air conditioners installed until 2050 will go up exponentially. We know that by 2050, the power demand for air conditioning will be as much as the entire power demand today of China. Last year, the energy demand worldwide increased by 2%, and half of it is dedicated to cooling. Half of it. So 1% increase in 1 year, only as a result of cooling. It's our comfort expectation, but it's a very small group of people. It's only the Northern Hemisphere who has access to comfort. So that's why we provocatively talk about discomfort, healthy discomfort, or the edge of discomfort. So is it really appropriate that we have a thermostat and we can control every temperature we want to have, no matter what time of year? In our indoor environments in winter, we wear pants and t-shirts, and we have 22, 23, 24 degrees. At the same temperature we do have in summer. Is this really appropriate? And is it healthy? I mean, these are two questions we need to ask ourselves. Whereas at the same time, last summer, we had a heat wave in India where they had temperatures above 50 degrees, where poor people died because they do not have access to comfort. They do not have access to air conditioning. We are not the ones who say, no more air conditioning. It's just, let's say, what is appropriate comfort and who gets, and don't we need to make sure that people who really need to get access to a certain amount of comfort should get comfort. Now I lost my path. Can you repeat the question again?
I mean, generally, I understand this path from modernism that we are sort of going and realizing it worldwide without taking into account
I don't remember the question.
Yeah.
So I was going back through the story of modernism. But what I wanted to say is, I really see a new zeitgeist now in architecture. I really see that a lot of people are tired of this glass tier concrete architecture. We see amazing projects in Spain. People, not only in Spain, everywhere in Europe, but in Spain, they were going through such a deep valley economically that they developed so much creativity. I saw projects about affordable housing using natural stone, clay, timber. So these are all solutions we suddenly see for affordable housing solutions in Spain, which is amazing. We see schools in Spain built out of clay and timber without air conditioning. without any air conditioning, just using passive control. This is so far away from this idea of concrete and steel and glass. And we see this new zeitgeist all over. So I see it in a positive way. I think architecture can make still an important contribution. And we see a young generation of architects coming up who really understand this and explore a new expression of architecture. And I don't want to come with a new ism. I don't think we need a new ism. Don't need postmodernism or whatever, however we want to call it. We need to get common sense back into architecture. And this is what we see with a young generation everywhere coming up.
Yeah, but in this sort, I think there's some very important things that you mentioned about this. Although we see those projects, and a lot of them are also implemented in the northern hemisphere, but yet we see in deserts, in Dubai, in these very dense and very extreme climate cities where they still are keeping the same principle. And my question would be, what and how would we fasten this? How could we even help to? Is it a question about education or about legislature, or what could we as architects or as activists do in this sort to try to really show that the issue is there and change it?
Of course, we see a lot of stupidity in this world, and particularly in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, and so on. And it's interestingly enough, you see this star architects in this. I don't want to blame anybody specifically, but you see this old world kind of this 90th and early 2000 years thinking continuing in a wrong environment. But anyway, what you say is not, I would not necessarily agree to. You also see on the Southern Hemisphere a lot of interesting smart solution and nice, super great young architects coming up with won the Holcim Award last year or 2 years ago for a surf school in Ghana with an amazing project. There is a guy from Milan, Niklas Kasparek. He developed bamboo housing, and he started with an NGO. He started bamboo housing, and where they also grow the bamboo with a local community. They teach the people the skills how to use the bamboo and translate it or use it for building construction in Nicaragua. Now they are talking to Mexico. And there are a lot of initiatives worldwide that are interesting. And what's crazy is that if we look at the numbers, the pure numbers, in the global north, we have no idea how to cope with the heat. All our urban design is maximizing urban heat island effect, is worsening the problem. We have the highest footprint per person in terms of CO2, in terms of resource consumption. And now who are we that we go to the Southern Hemisphere, to the people in the Southern Hemisphere, and tell them what they should do? And I think whereas in the Southern Hemisphere, and I don't want to romanticize it, but in the Southern Hemisphere, they have a much lower footprint. They know better how to cope with the heat. And they have a huge heritage of know-how, how to deal with passive design, with coping with heat, etc., indoors as well as outdoors, also in urban design. And so we started this initiative, which is really, we're aiming for celebrating this heritage they have developed in the global south over centuries decades and centuries, I have to say. So that in the global south, they're not looking to the global north and trying to copy all the mistakes that happened here in the north. There are good examples, and it's not that they don't exist in the global south, where they have a huge demand for housing. I think this is where they really need good examples. But things happen. We just needed I think what we need to achieve, I mean, at the end of the day, we need to see that the percentage of buildings designed by architects and engineers is negligible. We don't really know the numbers. Some people say 2%, some people say 1%, some people say 5 to 10%. However, it's negligible. So a shift can never, or so far, our community have never managed to change the world of the built, or to change the built environment in the world. So this is why we need an initiative that spreads much faster. We need to get the word out. We need to get out of our bubble. I think that's the problem. We always talk to ourselves, and we always celebrate ourselves. I was just at the opening of the Architecture Biennale in Venice, and I thought, it's a gathering every other year where architects meet architects to celebrate architecture. But nobody from outside is really taking care of it. They don't care. The world does not take care of. They are not interested in what we celebrate. So that's something we need to talk about. How do we get out of our bubble? If we really believe we have good solutions, how do we get those out there?
Mm-hmm. And here we are making a podcast for architecture students, but in that sort, I mean,
sorry, I don't want to discourage
no.
any architecture student. There is a huge demand for a transformation of the built environment, a sustainable transformation of the built environment in the Northern Hemisphere. For affordable housing, smart, sustainable, affordable housing in the Southern Hemisphere. And so I think we can contribute to better solutions. And so there is a world out there, but let's stop celebrating stupidity and try to get out of our bubble. I think that's the mission we should take serious.
Yeah. Actually, you mentioned Architecture Biennale, and I had the question written about this as well. As you with Transolar, you have also an entry in this year Biennale, and I was quite intrigued by this topic of air conditioning and especially, as you mentioned before, the huge power demand that it makes and that it produces. And maybe you could elaborate a bit on this entry and tell a bit how did it go and what's the main message behind this.
Yeah, I mean, we had this very privileged request by Kalorati. Kalorati is a good friend, and he was also a visiting professor once here at the chair 10 years ago. And so Carlo called me, and it became clear that he became the director or the curator of the next Biennale. He called me, and he had the idea that the first hall should make climate change experiential. So how can we experience what it really means? And then we did this. We built up a team with many people, and it's not only Transolar. There were also Daniel Barber was involved, who wrote this essay After Comfort, which is really important for us. We built up our research on this idea of the edge of discomfort and what is discomfort, based on this essay of Daniel Barber, After Comfort. But also here the chair was involved. Bilge, who is a PhD student here at the chair, she was basically the art director of the whole installation. And so the installation, we're using air conditioning. So you walk through a space where an Italian artist, Michelangelo Pistoletto, he designed pools which indicate the rise of the seawater level. And so he has the horizontal installation at the bottom, and everything above 70 centimeters is basically our installation, which is a chaotic installation of hanging air conditioners. And 12 of them, it's almost 100 air conditioners, 12 of them are operating. and they're cooling the second space. And when you cool, you produce waste heat. And the waste heat is heating up the first space. So the first space is basically indicating the outdoor environment. This is where we damp, when we air condition a building, we damp our waste heat into the city. And many studies has been done in Singapore and various North American cities that really show to what extent the waste heat of air conditioners is actually worsening the problem by increasing the temperature of the city. Sometimes also in the Middle East, Abu Dhabi, significantly also increasing humidity levels in the cities. So this is what we call urban heat island effect. And this is what air conditioning is doing, contributing significantly, like cars also, to the urban heat island effect. And so what we want to, it's a space which is really uncomfortable. And so the deal with color was we do not hide anything. So you see all the piping, you see all the wiring, but you walk in a space which is dark, it's hot, it's noisy from the air conditioners, it's moist, high humidity, and it's uncomfortable. But it's really, let's say, displaying and making it experiential, the climate of 2100. We also, I've got to mention, we also worked with climatologists from the ETH, and they made modeling which got also published in a scientific publication about predicting the future climate of 2100 in Venice. And this is what we display in this place. And then what we said is, like, if we have this opportunity to have an installation showing climate change, we want to also get a message across. And there are basically two messages we want to get across. And you recognize it when you get into the second hall, which is air conditioned, which is the cooling. And you see the air conditioners. And we say, listen, it's our comfort expectation which is causing this. That's number one. And number two is the fact that we air condition our indoor environments make the situation even worse. So think about when you design a building, how much air conditioning you really need, what you can do with passive design, and so on. And so we called this installation, the title is Terms and Conditions, because we feel like when you open a website and they show you, or a software, whatever, or you buy something and it pops up the terms and conditions, which is something nobody reads. And with climate change, we have the same feeling. We have the impression that nobody reads it. And so we say, like, when you walk in here, this is the future climate. And this is what we all signed up for. This is what we accept with our demand for whatever comfort at whatever time.
Mm-hmm. To some degree, I think it connects with the last message that you said about the fact that we need to really get the message out. It's not always about the design, but sometimes about just since, as you said, the percent that engineers and architects of the buildings they produce is quite low. And so I thought, maybe these installations in some sense, although in the Venice Biennale, could also be the thing that would kind of help to change the mindsets. And in that sort, looking at also your portfolio and everything, it seems that outside of the work as a researcher and as associate of Transolar, I believe now would be appropriate. You're also, there is also quite a lot of work in regards to these installations of these very public objects, of this even sort of very intimate type of experiences that get created through these with the help of some climate conditioning. And I was just thinking, is that maybe a way how we could try to raise awareness, or was that the point in this sphere of work, or maybe.
No, absolutely. I mean, sometimes we call it science communication. It's like we have no panel in this installation at the Biennale, but I got so many emails and WhatsApp from friends who walked in and said, like, this is like impressive. And it's like confusing at the same time. It's like create this kind of weird perception all of a sudden. People are getting uncomfortable. And yeah, I mean, I think that's what we need to do. We need to use, if we get the possibility and the opportunity, and again, this was a great privilege that we are allowed to have an installation in the first hall of the Biennale in the Arsenale, that we use this for getting a message across which is based on science, which is not just, let's say, coming out of gut feeling. So that's why we sometimes call it science communication. But we need to get these messages and our research here, but also, let's say, what we do in building design. We need, again, this has to do with also with the bubble. We need to be able to explain it to our parents. That's what, if I can explain it to my mother, everybody will get it. And if we want to get out there, if we want to get out of our bubble, that's what's necessary. And I mean, I think what you see, I just listened to a podcast about the situation in the United States. But there is, let's say, the society is really divided, and there is a bigger group of people also here in Europe who do not believe in science anymore. And this is crazy and strange and stupid. But at the same time, we need to think about also how do we communicate to the people who are not in our environment, who are not in science, who are not in the academic environment. I think it's also a little bit related to an arrogance that comes out of our community. So that's why I think it's so important that we use those kind of installation, and those people also don't go to an architecture biennale. But anyway, we had also an installation, a very important installation at an expo in Milan, where we showed to what extent you can manipulate with low-tech measures outdoor environments, which you could use in cities, etc. So, yeah, I think it's, like we are not an office that we don't see our mission in installations, in some kind of installations for climate, for science communication. However, if we do get the opportunity every couple of years, we should take advantage and think hard about how we get a good message across.
Absolutely. And so I want to jump back. I think before we jumped, we were talking about the social impact of this climate designing can have. And in terms of that, you also mentioned this in Global South, as they were using these various vernacular approaches to create this very low cost and affordable housing which is with good climate conditions. And that was and oftentimes when we think about this good climate conditions, we think that it's some kind of an extra or even a luxury or something that you need with intricate mechanics and so forth. But I think when through vernacular architecture, there's sometimes we see that the answers are, although not simple, but still they have been produced and can be specified for the given context. And I was thinking how this passive design strategies, does it have a chance to really create climate conditions, good climate conditions, affordable, and to kind of help to again save these people who are literally dying from the heat waves have a broader social impact?
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we designed a school in Damascus without air conditioning, just using solar chimneys and nighttime cooling, like a breathing architecture that is dealing with it. But you also see nice examples from all over the world where they have like air conditioning only in some spaces with serious multiply architects. Our Munich office here could work on the National University of Singapore, where we air condition only to 29 degrees and then use ceiling fans with air movement to provide comfort. I mean, the question is not necessarily only AC or no AC, only passive design. If you are in a tropical environment, the potential of passive design gets limited. I mean, with material, with cross ventilation, with air movement, you can do something, but it's limited. And so the question is, how can we use cooling then in a very smart way? But yeah, the short answer is yes. And in we can learn a lot from vernacular architecture from the Global South. But how do we make it scalable? I mean, that's the big question. It's cheaper to build a building out of concrete, steel, and glass. 6-story, 10-story, 20-story, whatever. It's cheaper, it's easier. And so how do we apply those? First of all, how can we manage that we all start to celebrate this kind of architecture, these kind of solutions, that we don't always aim for this kind of one-size-fits-it-all architecture, glass, steel, and concrete, but also thermostat and air conditioning, end of story. We need to celebrate different type of architecture, different type of image, different type of solutions, other strategies. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is it doesn't need to be 1-0. I think that's very important. I think we should not come from the Global South and say, sorry, we installed all the air conditioner that has messed up this world, and you're in the Global South with all your heat, you are not allowed to install air conditioning. Mm-hmm. So it's just like, how can we hybridize it to make it smarter? I think that's the question. What can architecture contribute? Architecture in terms of form and material we use, in terms of cross ventilation, solar chimneys, all these kind of topics can solve most of the problems in most of the climates. And how do we supplement it? When we get the 50-ish degrees in India, how do we supplement it with some level of mechanical systems? Simple, robust, easy. I think that's what we need to aim for.
Absolutely. And jumping back to the global north and the issues that we're having here, not just looking there, but also, as you mentioned before, that there is huge heating is also a major problem. And while we are here talking about this other part of the world, we're not ourselves maybe doing the homework and what could be done in this response. And what should we?
We have to do our homework, absolutely. And if I look at Germany, the transformation of our built environment will be a huge challenge. Also an economic, big challenge for many people, for many homeowners, this transformation. It's about heating losses, but there's the same thing. It's like, do we really need to have in winter 22 degrees everywhere at any time? So that's sufficiency, we call this. I think we need to talk about our comfort expectation. And when we look at the social relation, poor people, if we look at affordable housing, we have a high density of people living on small apartments. These people are not the problem. The problem is the wealthy middle class. they live in big houses or big apartments with just 2 people or with a low density of people. And they waste and use, and I'm part of this, I have to admit, as professor of a technical university, you're part of this group. We use the most energy. We have the highest footprint. So we really need to think about, do we need those big houses? Do we need those big apartments? Can we share it? And what level of comfort do we need? But then we need to transform our heating supply. We need to get rid of gas. We need to get rid of combustion at all and other sources to provide heating. So it's a transformation of the built environment. It's a transformation of the infrastructure. And then on top of it, we see urban heat island effect. We see that in summer we do get hot periods. So this question, we see an increased mortality rate in our cities in Germany during heat waves in summer. So this question of climate adaptation will be another big topic. So it's basically those 3 topics. It's like, what do we do with our buildings to reduce heating demand? And it's a question of sufficiency also. It's a question of comfort expectation, infrastructure, and how do we deal with summer extreme conditions.
And I believe our time is going. No, we still have time. Okay, then I will ask you two final questions, and
my answers are too long.
No, it's perfect. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I was just another aspect I was thinking about is this mindset people often have of climate proofing the building instead of climate responsive building. And on one hand, there is like this hard approach where you have this house is completely independent, and in indoor climate is completely independent of what is going outside. And on the other hand is kind of this approach where you adapt to the exterior environment. And I was just wondering, could you maybe elaborate a bit on this? To what extent this issue is? To what extent we can say that we're building buildings climate proof instead of climate responsive, which is the dominant one, and what could be the main reasons for that?
I mean, as you said, I would use different words, but there are basically 2 different approaches. The one is the hermetically sealed building, basically the passive house philosophy. So you put your building is wearing 5 pullovers, the windows are small, and you keep everything hermetically sealed, and then you have a mechanical ventilation system. You're fully dependent on a machine providing you fresh air. And the other one is more, but you have the indoor, everywhere the same indoor conditions inside this hermetically sealed box. And the other approach is more like having a variation of conditions, having more breathing architecture, breathing buildings. So that's climate responsive, like you described it. So those are the 2 approaches. And I mean, we are more in favor of the second one, as you can imagine. But both work. Physically, both approaches work. And both approaches do have their pros and cons. What we see is in all bigger projects where there was a monitoring, that the hermetically sealed system does not provide the results we expect. Does not provide the results we calculate. We call it performance gap. And it's very simple. People still open the window, despite this hermetically sealed environment and the mechanical ventilation that provides enough fresh air. People open the window because for whatever reason, people are somehow want to be connected to the outside. And I'm one of those people. I'm sleeping with an open window, winter and summer. But my sleeping room is not heated. And sometimes in winter it goes down to 10, 12 degrees. This is actually when my wife moves into the kids' room. But I love it. I love when it's cold. I love to hear the birds. I love to feel the draft. And there are people like me who prefer this kind of environment. Mm-hmm. And that's why we see this performance gap in the passive house approach. It's not about the physics. Physically, it works. And so we believe more of this environment that is more connected to the outside. But then if we do this, then we need to consequently also accept that it's not always comfortable everywhere at any time. We can't have everything. Mm-hmm. So that's the other thing then. But if we do this, then suddenly we have a lot of freedom in design. We have a lot of freedom in architecture. We all look at the Lacaton Vassal approach to deal with renovation of housing complex for apartment buildings with buffer zones, with different temperature approaches, different climate zones, breathing architecture. And it's beautiful and it's nice. And it's a different approach. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it kind of also emphasizes the big gap between us and the nature. Not the nature as this birds and trees, but the nature as what's going on outside. I think it's quite crazy to imagine that you're living inside of this completely independent of the exterior climates, and for some reason that is something that sometimes people are going towards, I believe. Yeah. And so to wrap it up, I would like to ask, as we have probably some listeners definitely some listeners to this, and I think we have heard a lot of ideas and approaches, but what could be something practical steps, something practical that you would say that when going on a site, when thinking of a project, what should young designers, young architects have in mind to not make the mistakes that we have seen throughout history?
Oh, that's a really tough question. I think we should always, or I'm convinced that we should always think about appropriateness. That we need a good understanding of what are the needs for the people, the users of the building. What are their real needs, and what is an appropriate answer to their needs? And then we should be brave in terms of architectural strategies that let's say provides an answer to those needs, but an appropriate architectural strategy. I really like this term appropriateness. What is appropriate? It's not what can we do. That was driving architecture for decades and was totally stupid. It's this kind of because we can architecture. No, it's about what makes sense. How about this common sense? And then bringing a poetic appearance or some poetic environment to our architecture by, let's say, by spatial qualities, by environmental qualities, by the quality of light, by the haptic qualities of the materials, and not this kind of wow approach. Where we are tired of all these wows. But I always say, like, what touched me the most, and I have seen a lot of wow architecture over the last decades. But what touched me the most is a friend of mine who is an architect from Rome. And he showed me a plaza where 4 streets enter this plaza. And so there are 3 buildings that are creating the edge of this plaza. And those buildings are all the same language. And then he told me that those buildings got built over a period of something like 150 years by different architects. So there was the first architect who had an idea about what should be the edge of this plaza, describing, let's say, the boundary of the plaza. And all architects followed him, contributed to the same idea. I feel nowadays, all the time, we try to reinvent the wheel with every building. But it really touched me that all of them said, like, this was a good idea he had, or she, I don't even know, and say, let's follow this path and not bringing in our own ego to have something new. I think we need to be more humble. I think that's the message. But still, I think we need to be more humble. That doesn't mean that our architecture or the built environment should not be poetic. The opposite is actually the case.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then I guess we could wrap this up. Thank you for having us, and it was a great pleasure. Today with us we had Thomas Auer, and we look forward seeing you on other episodes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You were listening to the podcast Rokturs. You can find more about our new episodes in our Instagram, podcast.rokturs. This podcast is made by Alise Grebeņuka, Elizabete Dreimane, Artūrs Dāvids Bieziņš, Marija Ozola, Dominiks Cipkins, and Toms Martins Šaķis. Thank you for listening.